topic, lean, lean it and mean it, the fundamental six of project management as part of Uruk Education Series webinar. Our speaker, Ms. Sandra Hoskins, is a publisher and author. She specializes in project management, consulting, education and training, coaching, enterprise project management, portfolio management, and program management. Sandra believes in the benefit of project management as a fundamental life skills and encourages the use of project management to achieve personal and professional accomplishments. Welcome, Ms. Hopkins, and thank you for being with us. And I would like to remind anybody, if you have any question, you can always interrupt Sandra. She's fine with this, and she will take any questions. But we still have a chance to answer all your questions at the end of the webinars. As well, if you'd like to leave your questions in the chat area, we will be looking at it and we will respond back to it right after the presentation. So, Ms. Hopkins, thank you, and you can start your presentation.
Thank you, Nada. So, most people come to project management something similar to the way that I did. I was a newly minted second lieutenant in the Royal Canadian Army, and they said, here, do this. And at 18 years old, I knew absolutely nothing about project management. I knew even less about scheduling. And my journey building my passion for project management is very slowly morphing into something that Munir and I talked about, probably 10 years ago. And that is to have project management taught in schools. Really looking to start potentially in kindergarten. And with that in mind, in order to have project management practiced as a life skill, not just something that you do at work and then you never use those skills again. And looking at all of the volume of published articles and recommendations, almost all of them ask us to do extra work. And when I look at the project management body of knowledge, the 6th edition and its 49 processes, there isn't anybody that is on earth that can add 49 more things to everything that you do every day. In fact, we would be hard pressed to add 6. And so based on feedback from my mentors, and I've had 2 phenomenal gentlemen who have foundationally changed the way that I manage projects. One is Levon Hovagimian, and he was my first mentor in mining. And I was working on mining projects, and I grew up 500 miles north of Winnipeg in Canada in a hard rock mining community. It was very small, and the projects in mining up there were very simple. The projects that Levon worked on were very complicated, and it was open pit mining. And so I learned best practices from that gentleman. And it foundationally changed the way that I approached project management. And the first thing he told me was understand this. For all of the successes that we don't have, project management isn't new. So the first one that we can identify is 11,000 BC. I want you to think about that. They built homes, they started an agrarian culture, and we still have standing today some of the buildings that they put into place. 11,000 years ago. That's older than Stonehenge, which is still standing. We have no idea how they got that built. Trust me, they didn't have Microsoft Project or Excel or any of the tools that we take for granted today. But it got built and it's still there. Followed by the Great Pyramid of Giza. It's a 1/4 inch out of plumb since the day it was built. Imagine a 1/4 inch out of plumb. In 2022, we're having trouble building homes that stay together that long. The Great Wall of China, still standing. The Taj Mahal, still standing. Done again, all of these without the benefits of tools. The Panama Canal, and I only picked 1904 to 1914 because without that 10 years, we wouldn't have the Panama Canal. And in fact, up until recently, it didn't even have any upgrades of a major type. The moon landing in 1969, which people still aren't 100% sure is real. There's some dispute occasionally. And then in 2020, our world foundationally changed. And all of those premises that we put into managing projects, we had to pivot on a dime. We were no longer able to access our teams directly. Many organizations went to remote work. We fundamentally changed our communication strategy. And now in 2022, there are people who will leave their job if they have to go back to the office. That's a foundational shift. And then we can look at all the disruptors in the market, including Uruk, that are looking to do something really different. Now, across all of these projects, they have something in common. They focused on something called, what does done look like? Or what is the definition of done if you come from the agile or hybrid world? What is it that we need to get done? The process to get there couldn't be complicated. So if we're looking at project management, this needs to be process-oriented, supported by tools. Tools like Uruk are going to help us implement the process that will help us be successful. If you look at the statistics for successful delivery of projects, the success ratio is somewhere between 25% or so are finished successfully. That means we have a 75% failure rate. And a lot of times that failure rate is because our processes are too complex. We ask people to focus on too many things. So from Levon and Jack Fraser, I got what we call lean it and mean it project management. 4 pieces to it. One is planning. Now, what planning gives us is an opportunity for discovery and confirmation. And the most important document we're ever going to get out of planning isn't the project charter. It isn't any other document that doesn't describe the work the team will do. Because the connection in your project to the deliverable at the end isn't all the documents that we write. Documents are about giving us an audit trail. It's about the conversation with the team that says, what is it that we are being asked to accomplish? And on the business side of the house, for the business sponsors or product owners to support what the team believes to be right. Then it's really important to do the work and create a to-do list. Or if you're using sprints, the sprint backlog. If for most people, if they don't have a list, they're going to forget to do something. No list, no estimates. No list, no schedule. No list, no budget. And part of that is because we are all in what Larry the Cable Guy would refer to as the get her done. The expectation of our stakeholders is that we can make magic happen every day, every time. And because our teams are magical to some degree, they make it happen. The challenge with making it happen is we sometimes don't dot the I's and cross the T's. And one of the foundational principles of lean is to know where you've been and where you're going. Also to track. This is the one thing that I think I found really hard to adopt, because I'm used to planning. I'm used to getting my team together and getting the work done. Getting people to tell you what they've really done is complex, because the more you ask, the more they foundationally believe that you're micromanaging, that you don't trust them. But I will tell you that the approach to making that work for you is say, tell me so I can protect you. I need the good news, I need the bad news, and I need the so-so news. And I need it early and on a regular cadence, because if you wait to tell me until like 2 hours before it's due to be delivered, how can I support you? And if you're going to track, reconcile the outcome. Because reconciliation, and it doesn't matter whether you use Microsoft Project or Smartsheet or Excel or Uruk or any of these tools, if you don't go back and make sure that everything is going the way it's supposed to be, this is problematic. So making sure that we come back and say, is there any impact at all on our go forward? And what this led us to was a foundational process document that we have practiced with high school students. So in 2020, just before the lockdown for COVID, my team and I delivered project management for high school students. It's our first foray into project management in a school. And what we asked them to do was to develop and build obstacle courses made out of things you could own at a dollar store or the equivalent of a dollar store. So it was things like pool noodles, hula hoops, buckets, lawn darts, small bow and arrow, anything that they could think of that they could use as part of that. And what we did was we said, how do we get these students to leverage what we call the Callan group process? So the very first part of the foundational 6 is the scope of work. And what we had them do was to sit down, looking at all of their inventory and saying, what are you going to do? What are you going to build? Make a list. Give me 3 to 5 things you're going to do. Don't give me 500. Give me 3 to 5. Don't give me 10, because 10 seems to be a magic number nobody can hit. But if you give them odd numbers, they tend to be able to make that happen. So what are we going to do? What are we going to build? Make your list. Then we said, what aren't you going to use? And they went through all of their inventory and said, okay, we're going to use this. We're not going to use that. And they put their stuff to the side. And then we went through and said, okay, what questions do you have? Since Sandra has pretty much delegated you to build this obstacle course that we're going to build in the gym, and the teachers are going to test the obstacle course because we need a test for quality. And then we're going to have students from grade 4 and 5 come and test your product. What questions do you have? Questions for me? What questions would you ask the grade 4 and 5 students? What questions would you ask the teachers? And that started a very robust discussion based on a conversation that I had early in my career with a gentleman named Al Davis. Now, Al Davis was this miracle project manager in my eyes. And let me tell you why. He had a 95% success rate in his projects. And until I met him, I had never met anybody with that level of success in their project portfolio. Look at your portfolio. Has every one of your projects been successful? When I met him, I had a 55% success rate. Now my success rate is closer to 85%. My goal is to get to Al Davis and 95% success. But he said, this first piece that we're talking about, he said, Sandra, nobody has these conversations. We never talk about what we won't do. We always talk about what we're gonna do. And I thought to myself, that was almost, that flash of brilliance that you get and you go, why didn't I ever think of that? And he said, because we don't view project management as an insurance policy. In effect, it's an insurance policy that starts the level of communication between you and your customer, whether they're internal or external. And if you're contracting, that conversation, what you will do is in the contract, and what you won't do better be in the T's and C's. Because you need to dot the I's, cross the T's, and protect your team. Now, the what you must do starts the conversation for estimating, and that starts with the list. What are you going to do? Do you have to do requirements? Then it should be on the list. Do you have quality standards you have to meet? Needs to be on the list. But from a project management perspective, those are deliverables. Those are results that we need to produce. The list is making sure that I can communicate effectively with the team. And without the list, we don't have estimates for time, for labor, and time and work are often misconstrued. They're not the same thing. What it takes to do on the calendar is going to be based on our availability. And one of our customers only assigns team members to projects 10 to 15% of their time. 10% of a week is 4 hours a week to do project work for you. Do you think that doesn't affect the calendar? Sure it does. That was Levon standing behind me and saying, Sandra, you need to estimate. In case you wondered, if you don't do this well, it doesn't matter what your schedule looks like at the end. So I need estimate for time and for work. And then all the other resources that I need also have to be looked at. And I audit projects. I'm a forensic project manager as sort of one of the fun things I like to do. And I audit projects. And what that means is I go in to projects that are in trouble. And one of the very first things I do is pick up the budget and the schedule. And on about 80% of the schedules I audit, procurement is missing. And everyone knows that since 2020, our lead times have gone through the roof. We have a customer right now, the lead time for their equipment went from 4 weeks to 6 months. And it wasn't on the schedule. The purchasing and sourcing part wasn't there. So when they were trying to communicate, they didn't have a baseline to communicate from. So making sure that we have all of those in place, making sure we understand our cost. And because I'm in Canada, exchange is always like dancing with an octopus. It's one of those things where today it's 20%, in a week from now it's 35%, and in another 2 weeks, depending on the state of the economy, it might be less. So costs aren't just what I'm going to pay for things that are tangible, but also things that I have to pay for that are in flux. Once I have my estimates, now I can look at the dependencies and I can start to say, what's the order of execution? And somebody said to me, but we use Agile, so I don't need dependencies. Well, sure you do. It's just for less, and it fits in a tighter time frame. This process works as part of sprint planning because you have to have this conversation. You can't do a sprint plan without it. You certainly can't do a traditional project without this conversation, or a hybrid project either, because we need to start with that scope of work. So scope of work is number one. Number two is a schedule. You can run any project, any size with these two. You don't really need 6, but you do need 2. And the schedule needs to be real. It needs to confirm what the team believes to be correct. Whether you're using Gantt charts, network diagrams, or task boards, it doesn't matter. You need some way that the team understands the order of execution. We also need a budget. And we need the budget conversation, whether it's an operational impact or a project impact. There are 2 types of things that we can talk about in the budget. One is what is a one-time charge. The other is what is recurring. And if it's being absorbed by operations, we need to know that too. Now, getting this far is kind of the easy part, because it's easy to sell people on the value of a schedule, or maybe easier. And finance is going to hold our feet to the fire for the budget anyway. What we need to be able to do is track. And for most of the projects I audit, this is where the wheels come off the wagon, because the budget is tracked with the help of finance. The schedule is ours, and we're responsible for keeping it up to date. There is no reason on this planet that you should have a schedule that is more than 2 weeks out of date. That means the last time you updated it. Because this is where your team is going. This is your GPS. This is where we drive the information that we communicate to our stakeholders from. But we need to have that process in place. Now, that's all about what we will do. Let's go to Al's other point, which is what we won't do. And his take on this, and it's turned out to be true, is anything that's excluded is potential change. And Terry Paulson wrote a book entitled "They Shoot Managers, Don't They?" And in the book is a quote from Aldous Huxley. And it says, and I'm paraphrasing, "The only truly consistent human being is a corpse." And I thought about that, and I thought about all the projects that I've worked on in engineering and in IT and all these projects. And I thought, one of the assumptions that we always made is that there was going to be no change. There'd be no changes. It's like, yeah, sure. That lasts till you execute the first piece of work and something happens. But if you have the conversation early about what you will do and what you won't do, then you're starting that expectation management that becomes so important as we're moving forward. You can say, well, we talked about that when we started. Let's go back and look at what the driving influence is to have that change. Because expectations are unwritten requirements. It's something that somebody wants, maybe didn't articulate, but expects that you're going to do it anyway. And that unwritten requirement is sometimes where we get our changes from. And it will change. And if they do, your document might be a change log. But if they change their mind, we need to go and make sure that it's value added to the project. Is it something that we're supposed to do? Is it regulated? Is it a must do? Because trust me, federal governments have no sense of humor. When they decide you're going to do something, you're going to do it whether you think it adds value or not. And if it's approved, then you need to go back and make sure you've estimated for it. Make sure that it's on the list, that we've got resources, that it's in the schedule, and we update our budget. Now, that's the easy part, at least in my view. And that was the easiest part for the students too. What became more challenging was the questioning and interviewing, because they said, well, we don't know what to ask. Well, let's start with, what's the age range for these children that are going to be using your obstacle course? Who's the customer? Are they regulated? Do they have support staff, or is that something we're going to do? Because when we have no answers, what ends up happening is it becomes a risk or an issue. And risks are so important to track over every project that you do. My risk register has 4,000 risks in it and 21 categories of business. Now, do we use them all? No. We go in and say, do these categories apply? Okay, these are the risks we hit last time. And the reason that keeping them in a single spot is important is because sometimes risks are systemic. And you know it's going to happen. You absolutely know it's happened every time. Well, in that case, it's not a risk, it's an issue. And it may not have a resolution. But things will go sideways. And sometimes it's little, and sometimes it's not. Up where I grew up, they were drilling a mine and somebody cut the bottom off a lake because they missed on the specifications where the drill was supposed to go for the borehole. And they have a pump in that mine running 24/7, pumping the water out of the bottom of the mine and back out into the lake. And they can't plug the lake. That's just not happening. Now, will you cut the bottom off a lake? Not likely. But could it go wrong to some degree again? Possibly. We have a customer who forgot to put lead shielding in an MRI room in a hospital. We build hospitals every day. Is it a question you could ask? Did we put lead shielding on the list of things to do? And if it goes sideways, then we have to have a plan of some kind to take corrective action. But it's all predicated on allowing what's included to drive the process, understanding that change and risk are part of that. Now, somebody said to me once, well, what about quality? Quality needs to be on the list. Is there quality assurance standards? Yes. Is there control pieces we have to do? Yes. But it all comes from the list. A good, robust, what we must do will shorten everything and make it easier to deliver. I have worked with a team and we did a full e-commerce site, fully functional, deployed in 8 business days. 8 business days. All because we use this process, because we focused on the scope of work, what we must do, what we won't do, and any decisions. And then we had our tracking mechanism. But the scope of work is not necessarily going to change on every project, but small tasks or activities will get added. So there's lots of ways where change can come from. But it's really important to measure what matters. And I stole this format a little bit from Ford. Ford had a quality program back in the day, which was the right tool for the right job at the right time. And I thought about it from a project management perspective and said, so what is it we need to measure? And it's really simple. We want to make sure that we're doing the right work. Is it on the list? Are people doing things they're not supposed to? Do they have the right skill set? Because sometimes that right skill set is actually the problem. They need a little education to maybe make them more effective. Training budgets are the first budgets cut when times are tough, because there's not necessarily perceived value. That we have the right skill set and the right person. I learned early on that working with someone isn't always the reason that they get to come on the project. You might want to work with them because you've worked with them before and they're really cool and you trust them, but they may not have quite the right skill set. So we need to look for that first. And then they need the right tools. You wouldn't send someone out to cut down a tree with a shovel, right? You just wouldn't. So why don't we make sure our team has the same tools? We have a customer who is still on Office 2003, and I'm pretty sure that dynamite will not get them off 2003. Think about where we are, 365. Think about the Google tool suite that has changed so much over time. At least get everybody on the same page at the right time. So one is about the list, the other is about the execution. They produce the right results, that they understand what done looks like, even at a task level. There is a prize at the end of every project, but there's also a prize at the end of every activity and task. And producing real results, that they're doing what they're supposed to, not watching March Madness during that week in March when college basketball is the most important thing to happen in the United States of America, right? If you're going to watch March Madness basketball games, then it would be a really good idea if you did your work at night, right? Or take vacation, whichever works for you. But real outcomes with tangible results. Also, report the right information. And I think that's important because what really happened, which is what WRH stands for, is something every project manager needs to know, every Scrum Master needs to know, every product owner needs to know, every team member needs to know. Because if they're not going to give you the good news and the bad news, we can't take the right decisions. Now, you'll notice that I use the word take the right decision as opposed to make the right decision. And that's because English is my second language. And when I learned English, the word that we learned was to take a decision. Taking a decision means you own it, consequence and all. Make it means, well, I made it, but I don't necessarily have to own it. So there's a subtle change in the way that the wording helps. It's also important to do the chunking so that we can get to here because clarity matters. Visualize the work. Take that, what we must do, describe it. Can we make it into smaller chunks? Do we have checklists that we can use? And it's important for people that we use the 5 W's when we interview: who, where, when, why, and what. Or as I have on my slide, why, what, who, where, and when. The order really doesn't matter because that's how we drive it going forward. Manage the inclusions. Every project you've ever worked on is about what's included in the project. And that's what we need our team to focus on, not on the other stuff that we're not going to do. Focus them in on what must be accomplished. Detail the work out, and it doesn't have to be upfront, but you can build over time activity packages that allow you to pull those in and make it easier. Won't be easy, but it'll be easier. and 3 to 5 things that they need to do for every activity that they're working on. Get them to scope at the activity level. This scoping technique from Al is solutions focused. It's solutioning 101. And we really want to take the time to make sure that that happens. Maximize the work not done. Get them away from focusing on the exclusions. If we don't need to do it, let's not talk about it. Share knowledge. Now, I've done a fair amount of work in manufacturing and in emergency services. And one of the things that has always fascinated me was the end of shift debrief. And long before Agile became the hot topic in 2000, manufacturing had been doing end of shift debriefs and shift orientations end of every shift. If they were running a 24-hour shop, 8-hour shifts, end of every shift, people do a briefing. Same in healthcare, same in emergency services. This is where daily stand-ups come from. And the purpose for that is to be able to say, what were our accomplishments today? And do you need help? And that 15 minutes at the end of a day with a team is very helpful. Now, I know that most people have more than one project on their plate. So having a daily stand-up with every team member may not be doable. But at a minimum, you need to touch base with your team members every day and your status updates as frequently as you need them. But a minimum of weekly, because you don't want to let people get too far out in the weeds before you have to bring them back. And get out and see things. One of the really cool things about what we do as project managers is our job is not the same every day. It's always that little bit different. That's why we do this, because every day is a learning opportunity. And you can get out and go on tours. You can go out and see work sites. You can go out and participate with team members. And if you can, understanding that consensus is best, but not always possible, someone has to be the person that makes the decisions. And that's predicated on someone delegating you the ability to make decisions. Because if you can't, then it causes problems in the go forward. None of this works at all without people. And when I met Levon, I was going to be working in an industry that I did not know anything about. I knew about mining, but I didn't know anything about open pit mining. And I didn't know anything about oil and gas production either. And he said to me, Sandra, the engineers know that you don't have any industry experience. And I said, I agree. And he said, I will hire you if you will do one thing for me. And I said, okay, name it. Probably not the best thing to have done, a little bit of a rush to judgment without finding out what it was he wanted me to do. And he said, I want you to spend some time with the engineers, and we're going to develop what he called guiding principles, what today we call ground rules. But this is really the value proposition for supporting each other as team members. And he said, if you do this, you will be successful. And I don't know that I was absolutely sure that success was tied to this value proposition. But it turned out to be true. And he did tell me one other thing that has resonated with me, what feels like forever. He said, you don't earn respect, you grant it. If you grant them respect, they will give it back to you 100-fold. And I grew up where we were always told you have to earn somebody's respect. And he looked at me and said, Sandra, when will they know they have it? And I went, well, that's a little odd. He said, you're going to ask them to do things that they won't understand why you're asking. But if you grant them respect, they will follow you anywhere. You know what? He was right. And the other thing he told me was read. And I always read. I read 5 or 6 books a month. And one of my favorite people in the whole planet to read about is Richard Branson. And the reason is because Richard is dyslexic, among other things. And he wrote a book early on entitled Screw It, Just Do It. And the premise in the book is that if you don't start, you will never learn. And that's probably one of our most important conversations that we have with our team members. Just try. Sit down, try and figure it out. If you need help, ask. But if you don't put your thoughts together, it's going to be really difficult to have a conversation. There should never be any secrets. Now, there will always be reasons why you can't share everything. And it's okay to say so. But that needs to be followed up with, I will tell you when I can. Right now, it's still a work in progress. We work together as a team. That's why one takeaway from the military that has served me so well today is that everyone is a team member, and I don't have to like them, but I have to work with them. And we're always going to find people that just don't click the way that we would like them to. But that doesn't mean we're not responsible for working with them. Today matters more than yesterday. And this one is hard for team members because it's the letting go part. 0% of yesterday matters. Absolutely 0% of yesterday matters. And if you really want a lean process, you cannot be focused on trying to fix yesterday. You have to be focused on what you learned from yesterday. 20% of today matters. That's your top 20% on your to-do list. In your schedule, that's your critical path. Make decisions and know who the decision makers are. And better yet, are they decision makers who procrastinate? Because if they do, then it costs you time, and the cost of delay is expensive. Learn one new thing every day, either something from a team member or something from a colleague, and have fun. Life is too short to be miserable. But in lean project management, the foundational 6 are the 20% that matters. They really are. The scope of work, the schedule, the budget, the performance tracking, the change log, and your risk register. And if you focus on those 20%, you will be 16 times more productive than the other 80% of the project management documents that people want you to build. Because the challenge for us as project managers is trying to keep the documentation up to date. And from a project management perspective, requirements documents are not usually done by the project manager, but do we track the status? Yes. Now, sometimes you might be the engineering lead and the project manager, and you have both of those. All that means is your life is just more complicated. The process of tracking doesn't change. So it's important to focus on those 20%. And then remember that this isn't just about work. This is about project management being a life skill. And what that truly means is if you look at your portfolio of projects, you're going to have some that are personal. They're yours, whether you're education or sports or hobbies or just things that you like to do because you're you. Then there are going to be things that you do with your family. Vacations are a project for some families. I have a friend with 8 children. Trust me, vacation is a project. Trying to get 10 of you anywhere has challenges. But think about all the things that you do with your family and friends that you just thought were an activity. And then you got into it and you didn't really understand why it didn't go as well as it could have. Then work. All the things that you have on your plate. I will lay you odds that if you sat down at the end of this and made a list of everything that you have on your plate today and categorized it, you would have an equal number of projects at work and at home. It's just the ones that are at home are on a slightly more flexible timeline. And then there's those who volunteer. I am in awe of people who volunteer. And one of the reasons for that is volunteer projects are the most difficult you will ever run in your entire life. And that's because volunteers are just that. They're volunteers and they don't have to come. And sometimes they don't. And then somebody told me that project management's like herding cats. And I said, no, it's not. It's like herding lizards. And the reason is because lizards do ceilings and walls and hang upside down from things. Cats tend to be a slightly more rational species, right? You'll find them climbing on things, but they're not going to be hanging upside down from a tree. But project management is about managing inclusion. It's that green list of things, what we will do. Change management is about managing exclusions. And risk management is about exceptions. And our role in project management is to manage the exclusion or the inclusions and monitor the exclusions and the exceptions. Because we want to make sure that we're scanning the horizon. And then from our team to yours, these are our ground rules for our organization. Our team members are given permission and expected to take it to focus on the 20% that matters every day. That means before they leave at night, they look at their to-do list and say, what are the 20% I have to get done tomorrow? Practice the attitude of gratitude. Thank you are the least used words in any language. Show respect for their labor, their contribution, their ideas. Share as openly as you can. Clean up behind yourself. The reason many project managers don't want to take on a new project from anybody is because there is no scope of work. The schedule is a mess. The budget may or may not be up to date. The reporting, nobody knows what it's going to look like. And there's no change log and there's no risk register. Well, if you don't have that, you're starting over from zero. Be honest, but tactful. Sometimes it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Be civil in conflict, which means deal with it. And especially in sprints and agile, where we're presupposing self-organized teams, sometimes self-organized teams just don't like to deal with conflict, so they don't. So it would be helpful to help them build towards that. We use ELM as one of our acronyms, which is Educate, Learn, and Mentor. Everyone should have the opportunity to grow, and grow also includes failure. Because if we never failed, you'd never learn to tie your shoes. And best have fun. This is one of the coolest professions you can be in. It so is. I mean, I've been doing this for so long, and every project is a new group of people. It's a new opportunity to learn. I manage every project the same way, and it goes back to the chart that starts with the scope of work. And it doesn't matter whether it's renovating a bathroom or $126 million IT projects where we deployed 6,000 workstations in 18 states and 25 servers. It's the same process. Did the work change inside? Yes, but the process itself is the same. So, any questions?
Thank you, Sandra. It was very informative. Any question? I don't have anything in the chat. We have time, so.
Okay, either I did really well at it or it's nothing there.
I don't have any question, but I love the presentation. This is one of the presentations that I'll probably come back to and watch the videos again and again. I really enjoyed it, Sandra. Thank you.
Well, you're entirely welcome.
Yeah, I felt the same, Sandra. I know I have a teenager in my house, so I'm definitely going to show him this presentation. I want to push him to learn more about project management, and that's the best way. It's really easy, simple, understandable, and it's all the information that you provided us today. It's like a key things for every, anybody's normal life, what you have to deal with in between, with people, with processes, with things that they have to take into consideration. It's so organized, so well, directed. Thank you, Sandra.
Welcome.
Hello, Monir. Hello, Nada, Sandra, and everyone. How are you?
All right.
Thank you very much. It's been a very lovely conversation, and it was a soulful conversation. Absolutely. During the presentation, Sandra talked about a book that she loves about change management. I think I wondered. I couldn't write the title of the book. I'll be grateful if you say the name of that book.
Okay. It's entitled "They Shoot Managers, Don't They?"
Mm-hmm.
And I bought it because I was running through the airport and it had bullets on the cover. And I thought it was going to be a really cool book to read. And it turned out to be about change management.
Very good.
And the author is Terry Paulson, Paulsen.
Awesome.
And if anybody wants, I have a recommended reading list that I'd be more than willing to share.
That is awesome. If we can have your list of recommended books, it's going to be a very awesome treasure for us.
Yeah, I'll share it with Nada and Munir, and they can perhaps get it out to you.
Yeah, I will put it also on the with the video link.
Very good.
So this way, when people go to the video, they can see the reading list. That reminds me, I should have do one. I used to do one, but I haven't done a reading list in a long time. So I would be curious to see yours.
Another book that's really good is People Can't Drive You Crazy If You Don't Give Them the Keys.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll be on the reading list with the author.
And during the presentation, you mentioned about a risk register consisted of 4,000 risk titles. Is it a kind of general list that you customize or benefit from that in every project based on the nature of that project? And is it available? Because I also very interested in the risk management issues, and especially in underground construction and survey projects, and I see the risk management as kind of the heart of every effort that we do to deliver the project in a successful manner. So it's going to be a very valuable source if you can share this amazing register.
Okay. I'm going to have to scrub it a little bit because if I don't, some of them you will know who the company is, and I have non-disclosure agreements with them. So I put my email in the chat, and if you email me, it'll take me about a week or so to go through it and make sure that I remove anything that's specific to customers that you might recognize, but happy to share it.
Very good. That's going to be very awesome.
And since there's a lot of mining stuff in it, maybe that would help.
Very good.
You talk about underground, that's typically mining.
Oh,
or oil and gas.
Very good. Very good.
Okay, your mic's off.
I'm saying many people commenting on the chat that really like the presentation. So even though they haven't spoken yet, but at least on the chat, if you have a chance to see it there, everybody is appreciating the presentation. Guys, any last minute questions?
And I'm out here if you're happy to talk.
Yeah. By the way, Sandra is one of our advisors, and I've known her for a long time. There's one project she and I have not worked yet on together, is the children, because I guess other projects have taken priority, but one day. Yeah,
my goal is to have it taught so that when students leave high school, that they have this skill already.
Yeah.
Because
even before high school. I mean, I remember even when I used to share with my kids when they were very young, they think sometime about, like I remember my one of my boys, he was probably in elementary school, and he want to organize a birthday party. And basically he did some drawing, and basically he said he need to ask people what do they like to wear. So that in a way, even a child that's 5 or 6 years old thinking about stakeholder management indirectly, right? I mean, if we relate that, that's the case. It's amazing how much things we can learn and we can do, but we need to formalize it maybe better to help these kids plan their futures.
Well, and sometimes it's small things. One of my favorite stories that I share with students at the university is going to visit my grandchildren, and my 5-year-old granddaughter is standing like this, looking in her room.
Yeah.
And she said, huh. And I said, what's the problem, sweetie? And she said, Mom says I have to clean my room. It's a pigsty. And I looked over her head, and so help me, I swear everything she owned was on the floor. She and her brothers had been playing in her room, and it was just a catastrophe. And that was when I realized that she didn't understand what clean your room means. So she didn't have a starting point.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, take all your stuffed animals off the bed and put them on the floor. And you know that feeling you get where you're making a bigger mess than you started with, your hair sort of stands out in the back of your head. And then I said, okay, take the comforter off, take the pillows off. And she does those things one at a time. And I said to her, do you need help to take the sheets off the bed? And she's 5 years old and about this tall, right? And she says, of course I do, I'm short. It was like, okay, so let's take it off the bed. Okay, let's put it in the hamper. Now, where does Mom keep the sheets? So we went to get the sheets. And I said, okay, do you need help putting them on the bed? And she looked up at me and went, I'm still short. It was like, in this short period of time, you missed that piece. So we put the sheets on the bed. She takes the pillowcases off, puts them in the hamper. We put the pillowcases on, we put them on the bed. We put the comforter on the bed. And then we looked at the floor, and typical, you don't know what's clean and what's dirty. So you just pick it all up and it goes in the hamper. And then you pick up all the toys. We can start that level of I don't want to call it task management because it really is your to-do list when they're that young. And in 20 minutes, her room was clean, but we delegate with an expectation of how it should happen. And Art Nakamoto from UPS said, you always delegate the what, not the how, which gives them that opportunity to get started. Now, at 5 years old, she didn't have the what yet, but she does now.
Okay.
And what that does is if we don't say, this is how I want it, then the way that we manage people changes, right? It's
Correct.
the ability for us to say, this is what I want. Now you go out, tell me what you think needs to be done, and then let's have a conversation.
Right.
Sandra, I think the case is the same, what you said about the situation with your granddaughter is the same with many organizations when it comes to implementing organizational project management or a strategy implementation unit. They are in the same situation, though when you look at those companies, you see that they have run many big projects, etc. But at the organizational level, it's a big mess for them, and they want people who can direct them towards how to clean this organization and implement these transformational initiatives for them to lead to better project management maturity level.
Well, I think part of the challenge is that PMOs have become directive PMOs and they become extremely tool focused. And so they don't often bridge the difference between product development and project management very well. And so that sometimes product development is, and I'm going to pick a major highway in the United States on I-94, and project management's on a service road, and we don't get them connected in really well.
Correct.
And product management is what we need to do. Project management is how we manage delivering that.
Exactly.
I think that's the challenge.
I think one of the big challenges related to that is over the years, we have learned to be purists in project management, which means we don't care about the product. We are only there to produce an output. This is why one thing we are trying very hard in the Uruk platform is to integrate project management with product and asset management as part of the organization culture, because at the end of the day, project management doesn't exist in an organization because we like to do project management. It's there to deliver value. And delivering value is through the product that we produce in order to achieve the benefits. And often that's missing. We are out of time, but I mean, I'm not sure if Sandra can stay on. If anybody, I'm going to stop the recording, but if anybody wants to stop, if she can stay and you want to continue the discussion, we can keep it open.
Yep, I can stay.
Okay, let me stop the recording. And then if anybody wants to, if there's any question left.